I guess we could get started here. So welcome back, everyone. This has been a weird week because it's been a while since we've had like a normal week, but we're getting to the end. Um, so today we're going to be discussing mainly this issue of the monster's request of Fred's request of Victor to make a wife for him, a companion. And so we'll discuss that, the implications of it, whether or not it's a good idea. We'll also do a quick overview of the chapters that you read today. But any questions or issues before we start?
I think in my excerpt thing yesterday, I called Frank.
Frank? You called Victor Frank, or you called
The monster
Fred Frank? You know,
So it's like
Frankenstein and Frank. Which actually reminds me to say, hey, if you didn't, make sure you upload that close reading exercise. Okay. So like I said, today we'll be debating whether or not it's a good idea to make a wife for Fred. Your notes are also due today. If you didn't do them, you can use your free pass. Just open a Word doc, type free pass, and upload that to Canvas instead. And over the weekend, please read chapters 20 and 21. But like I said, we'll do a quick discussion of 18 and 19 and then move on. So we've heard the monsters story within a story within a story, and now we're back to just the story within a story of Victor and Fred talking it out. And like I said, Fred says, no one on earth, no human accepts me. The only person who possibly would accept me is another of like myself. So you must, repeat your experiment, make a mate for me. Victor weighs the option, says yes, and then proceeds to immediately procrastinate on this task and waffle about how he's going to do it, where he should do it, if he even remembers how to do it. So he initially returns home to his father, and we'll get into things, but I just want to mention this line that I find kind of funny. So he's Victor, so obviously he's going to mope and be emo about it. So he goes home, he's all mopey, and his dad notices that he's being all mopey, and he says, "Oh, son, what's wrong? I'm actually kind of surprised that you haven't enlivened your spirits by getting hitched. Why haven't you married Elizabeth yet?" And then he says, "You may perhaps regard Elizabeth as your sister, without any wish that she might become your wife." And I just thought it was kind of funny that it's a really weird, arranged relationship, and the father even notices that and comments on it. But no, still they're set to get married. And Victor basically says, I do want to marry Elizabeth. I'm going to do that. But before I do that, I want to get this whole monster thing out of the way, right? Figure that out first. So I have a few passages I want to talk through, but anything you guys want to throw out there about the reading? Parts you found interesting, confusing, notable, anything like that? Yeah, go ahead, Katarina.
I just thought it was kind of interesting as I was reading. The way he was kind of describing himself and his feelings were almost exactly like how the monster feels. I just thought it was funny. One part that stuck out to me is that he was describing his life as miserable slavery. And I think there was at one point when Fred really was calling himself a slave. I just thought it was funny that now Frankenstein has he was the master of the slave. Fred is now become enslaved by Fred.
Yeah, and that's actually a good line to keep in mind, because that idea of the master-slave relationship is going to pop up again in a few chapters. So good observation. And yeah, I also like the connection. They do seem to be trying to one-up themselves in seeing who is more miserable and melodramatic. That'll be one of the passages we look at. But anything else you noticed in this section? Great, Isabel, go ahead.
This is kind of more of a question, but I'm just confused as to why, like, it sort of seems like Victor keeps running from or avoiding his problems. Like, I don't understand why he's going on this trip when he really had, like, he has the monster to deal with, or how, when his brother gets murdered, like, he doesn't seem to want to either face the facts or admit what's going on. Like, it just seems that he keeps avoiding this problem and it's only getting worse.
That's a great point. And to be fair, I think he has a good reason for traveling away to do it. But this does seem to be what Victor does. He avoids the problem. I mentioned that he's procrastinating in the beginning of the chapter, kind of facetiously, but it's also true. Like, he keeps putting off making the monster, and the reason that people procrastinate on things is because they're trying to avoid the unpleasant emotions of completing some task. And that's really what's happening here. There's a marked contrast between his feelings when he did the first experiment between now and he feels guilty and like agreed to do it, but he's very much of a mixed mind doing it. He doesn't really want to. So he ends up, renting out this shack in a remote region to do it. But why doesn't he just do the experiment at his home in Geneva? Why does he flee and go on this trip through Europe before doing it? What do you think, Sophia?
I think it probably goes along with more of like his desire to just like be in isolation and to just like be away and alone from everything. Like he wanted to just be completely isolated, like in a new place, in a shack in the middle of nowhere. And it also could be like if he's trying to like not repeat his mistakes, maybe doing it in a new place will make him like feel better about it. And yeah, just like the whole isolation thing, I feel like.
Definitely isolation is a motif that we're seeing, and that's part of it. And he's looking for isolation, but there's also like a practical reason to find isolation other than like the emotional comfort that'll come with it. Your hand disappeared.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I was really gonna say what, like.
Well, you could say other things
The
too.
reason what Sophia said, he was like talking about his excitement when he first was creating the monster, and how like all of those emotions that was like completely like reflecting around how he's just like miserable.
Yeah.
This, so it makes sense how he like kind of, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
I guess the first time.
Yeah, it makes sense. And that's another passage that we'll take a look at in a second too. And then Leo, you had your hand up briefly.
Yeah, I was just I don't know if this is exactly the reason, but it could also partially be that if something goes wrong, he'd rather be like the new monsters on an island like a sea away from like the rest of his family in mainland Europe. So it could just also be a logistical thing, but it's not, I have a feeling that he's not exactly in that clarity level to me making decisions.
Well, actually, that's what I was going to say, that he does consider that in things. Oh, well, like imagine if he did this in his house. He like found an empty room, and then like his dad like opens the door to clean. And it's like, oh, yeah, about all these severed limbs on this table, I can explain. So that'd be kind of awkward. And also the monster is going to be following him around, watching him. So does he want the monster hanging about his house near his family? And what if he succeeds? And then all of a sudden there's this female monster running around his house. So he decides, I need to get as far away from civilization as possible. And also he goes on this sort of mini tour of Europe to, rub elbows with the scientists and philosophers who can help him, brush up on his science and try to remember how he did this experiment in the first place. So he ends up at last in this place called the Orkney Islands. They're at the northernmost tip of Scotland. It's this archipelago up there. It's kind of small, rocky islands, pretty remote. We're kind of moving in the direction of where Robert Walton was as well. And he gets this little shack there where he decides to run his experiment. You might also note that in this journey, he wasn't alone. Right? His buddy Henry Clerval comes back into the picture to help him out. So I want to talk about why Clerval shows up again. In particular, I want to look at one passage in the Pink Books. We're on page 133. So I'll read a passage here, and then my question is, what role is Clerval playing in this part of the story? Why does he pop up here? Second full paragraph of the page. After some days spent in listless indolence, during which I traversed many leagues, I arrived in Strasbourg, where I waited 2 days for Clerval. He came. Alas, how great was the contrast between us! He was alive to every new scene, joyful when he saw the beauties of the setting sun, and more happy when he beheld it rise and recommence a new day. He pointed out to me the shifting colors of the landscape and the appearances of the sky. This is what it is to live, he cried. Now I enjoy existence. But you, my dear Frankenstein, wherefore are you desponding and sorrowful? In truth, I was occupied by gloomy thoughts, and neither saw the descent of the evening star nor the golden sunrise reflected in the Rhine. And you, my friend, would be far more amused with the journal of Clerval, who observed the scenery with an eye of feeling and delight, than in listening to my reflections. I, a miserable wretch, haunted by a curse that shut up every avenue to enjoyment. So in this passage, as well as the rest of the chapter, what's Clerval doing there to move the story forward and also thematically? Let's go with Morgan.
Well, I feel like we can see in many ways how Clerval and Victor are very opposite. So I feel like he's Victor's foil, and he's kind of showing like what he could be like if he didn't just have a pity party for himself every day. Like,
Yeah.
it's like what Victor could be if he kind of got his life turned around.
Yeah.
And especially when Victor's making like such a crazy thing, like another monster, it's important to have someone that'll be with him that can kind of act as like a second brain,
Mhm.
like another way.
That's true. Yeah, all great points. Sean, do you want to add anything to that?
I also feel like Clerval is like the emphasis on romanticism of the like entire book almost, but in these like two specific chapters, it's kind of a textbook on romanticism. Like there's nothing more blatant than the fact that there's like a really bold emphasis on feelings, emotion, and like using your emotions to guide your life. And then also like every 2 seconds, Clerval is like, oh my gosh, look at this landscape. It's so beautiful. This is what it means to live. Look at the sunset, look at the sky, look at like the world that we live in. It's so good.
Mhm.
And like just as Morgan said, he is the foil emotionally to Victor as well, because obviously Victor's in this dark place and like he has this constant fear and skepticism of like, oh, the monster's following me, the monster killed my family.
Mhm.
Like he's probably doing all this stuff right now. And then Clerval's like, live in the moment, dude.
Yeah.
Like forget about everything and just like live here with me and have a good time and stop doing all that.
Yeah, great. Let's go with Aaron and then Leo.
Sorry. I also think that it serves like to reveal the duality of what he was doing, because originally when he created the first monster, it was like a really happy and exciting event, and he was like, "Wow, this is an amazing feat of science that I did."
Mhm.
But now they're kind of personifications, and that Clerval is like a personification of the original. I thought like, "Oh my God, this is an amazing feat of science that I completed," and then Frankenstein himself is kind of being revealed as like the darker side of what he did. He like, created a monster, and so like they're both, I think, personifications of the duality of the act, and that like there are good and bad sides to what he did. But now we're finally seeing the bad side throughout like the entire story. Like in the beginning, it was just good, but now that we're seeing like the after effects,
Mhm.
they're kind of personifying each side of the argument there.
Yeah, it's a good point, especially since Clerval has no idea about the true intentions of Victor being here. So he really is the naive joy before the experiment. Good. Leo.
I haven't read the book before, so I don't really know for sure, but I just get a vibe that like the happiness of Clerval's being set up just so we can be killed. Like a lot of this book is just like compounding misery between like the monster and like Frankenstein. So I again, I don't know if it's going to happen, but I could definitely see a chapter where like Clerval's dead and Frankenstein's in another. Oh, look at my friend who was so like rife with joy of the beauty of nature, and now my dastardly deeds got his like skull crushed in or something. I could just
I'm very glad that I'm wearing a mask. That's a good prediction, and we'll see what happens. But definitely these two chapters, I read as a sort of calm before the storm. You know, we know that something's going to happen with this female monster. It's going to come to a head, and right now they're just kind of it's like a buddy vacation. He's wandering around Europe. Clerval's really happy, in contrast to Victor. And so we're just like, there's this lull in the action. We're waiting and anticipating something. Something's gonna go. All right, Sophia.
Well, yeah, I guess I was just gonna kind of say like Clerval is just kind of a nice like break. Like he kind of breaks up just the constant like depression that everyone's been going through.
Yeah.
And it's like nice to have someone in this universe that's like happy and like optimistic and like enjoying like life.
It is nice
And-
having someone happy
Yeah.
in this book.
And like, I mean, I guess it's probably going to be temporary. Like that makes sense. It's not going to last forever, but it's just nice to have that like little spark of like hope and like joy in this seemingly horrible world.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Wow, I think Sophia just captured all of our feelings there. But go ahead, Sean.
In emphasis and support of what Aaron said, on the first page of chapter 19, Victor literally says, "But in Clerval, I saw the image of my former self."
Yeah.
Like, further, I don't know, further advancing the idea that it is like the duality of his own experiments. So
Yeah, good. I mean, I think in Clerval, Victor sees an alternative. Just he after the experiment goes and like starts studying foreign languages, and it's kind of like, well, what if he had just done that to begin with? You know, it's like, this is you, but not a STEM major. Like, what could have happened? You could have been traveling around Europe, you know, hobnobbing with the elites, you know, enjoying your life. But instead, you became engrossed with your abilities, engrossed with, you know, transgressing the bounds of what's acceptable for humans, and now you're dealing with the punishment. So it's kind of rubbing salt in the wounds for him. Right. I just want to end this part of the class by reading a paragraph towards the end of last night's reading, just to like keep that fresh in our head about how this new experiment is different than the last one. So I'm on page 142. Bottom of the page. In this manner, I distributed my occupations when I first arrived, but as I proceeded in my labor, it became every day more horrible and irksome to me. Sometimes I could not prevail on myself to enter my laboratory for several days, and at other times I toiled day and night in order to complete my work. It was indeed a filthy process in which I was engaged. During my first experiment, a kind of enthusiastic frenzy had blinded me to the horror of my employment. My mind was intently fixed on the consummation of my labor, and my eyes were shut to the horror of my proceedings. But now I went to it in cold blood, and my heart often sickened at the work of my hands. So we already sort of addressed this, but any other thoughts about this passage or this difference between the first time Victor makes a monster to now the repetition the second time here? Go ahead, Leo.
I feel like there isn't like a super grand point to make about it. It's more so just saying that like Victor at this point is miserable about doing it, whereas before he would have had that, I guess, youthful energy that you get when you're doing something new and when you're pushing boundaries, but now it's just kind of very cynical. Like before it was something that he wanted to do, but now it's just like a chore or else he'll like get killed. So there's just that switch in motivation for why it's happening.
No, that's fair. I mean, one of the big differences that I see is going to be expertly explained by Katerina.
Huh? Oh.
I saw your hand like slightly go up.
Saying, but I was just gonna say I think it shows like lots of like innocence kind of like, where he like
Yeah.
was very nice at the beginning, like kind of reality has hit him. That kind of just shows his character growth.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It is experience versus innocence. The first time through, he's in this flow state where he's so engrossed he doesn't notice anything. I almost see him like Sisyphus. If you remember the myth of Sisyphus, the essay Camus writes, if there's something along the lines of if there's a torture here, it's because he's conscious. And the problem now is that whereas the first time Victor was unconscious in making the monster, now he is acutely aware of every single detail about what he's doing. He feels, every technique and knows that what he's doing is wrong, and yet he has to do it anyway because of the consequences, because of the promise that he made the monster. Go, Sean, and Sophia.
This is very connected to like kind of what we looked at with the Jurassic Park readings, in that like I feel like the first time he really asked the question like, can I do this? Like, this is something I could do, and then this second time is this something I should do?
Oh yeah,
Kind of addresses both parts of that question in one.
That's a good connection. Yeah, that's true. It's just funny that he's asking that question now, and it's like it's a little late. You should have been asking this. Yeah, but yeah, Sophia and then Aaron.
I was gonna say it's kind of like he's in like a toxic relationship, like with, because like in the beginning he was like blinded by love and he was like so excited to do this and he didn't see how anything could go wrong, and then he finally saw like the truth and the realness behind what he was actually doing, and then but it's kind of like he's stuck in it because like when you're in a toxic relationship it's kind of hard to get out of it. So it's like he's kind of in that phase now where he's trying to get out of it, but he knows he has to stay even though he knows he's not happy and he knows it's like wrong. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that way of explaining it. Yeah.
I was gonna bring up the point that like in my head I keep thinking that like I can't find a way that this isn't like justified, because like he did create a monster that is now like totally miserable, so like it is kind of right and fair and just for him to create something so that this monster is now not like hating his life forever and ever and ever, and also so that like he doesn't go rampant and destroying everything because he's like just so depressed. But I don't think like, in my opinion, like I don't think this is such a wrong act, because the monster in and of itself is not corrupt. The only reason the monster is corrupt is because Frankenstein corrupted him. So like the act of creating the monster itself is not so evil, such that like the actor or the actions of Frankenstein are what made the monster the way he is. Because you saw like in the beginning, earlier in the book that he is sweet and he's innocent and all he does is want to learn.
Yeah.
And he does, and he sits and observes, and he's just looking for companionship, and he educates himself in like, the ways of life and all that. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. The only thing that corrupted him was the fact that he didn't have a family, and then the fact that like he saw his work with his son, and then like all he wants to do is help, and like is inherently innocent. So like I don't think the action of creating a new monster is actually all that evil if you treat it correctly, which obviously he didn't.
Yeah, it's a great point, and actually like leads in perfectly to what I want to discuss next is, should he do it? You make a compelling case that he should. That the problems that led to William's death and Justine's execution have nothing to do with Monster's birth, but rather with Victor's reaction to it. So let's explore those issues a bit. I'm going to put a link in the chat to a Padlet page. Padlet is just a kind of like a website where you can post your ideas, post thoughts, and the prompt for you is: should Victor create this wife for Fred? Why or why not? So okay, there you go. So you'll open that up. You'll see this blank page. In the bottom right corner, there's a plus sign. What you can all do is get your ideas out there and think through this. Do you think you should make the wife for Fred or not? Put a reason in. You could put multiple reasons if you'd like. So I'll give everyone a chance to get their ideas out there, and then you can read what other people are thinking, and this will lead into a discussion. I also enabled upvoting, so if you like someone's thought, you can upvote it. Fred at? No, Fred should get an emotional support animal. If he just had a cat, he would be much better off. It doesn't even have to be like a reanimated cat, like a regular cat's fine. You're only seeing 4? Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Yeah, just refresh. Makes more sense. Yeah. Okay, so it seems like people who are typing are done typing. So you can check out other people's responses and then use this as a springboard for discussion. So is there anyone who wants to elaborate on what they said, comment on something someone else has said, or just throw some ideas out there? We'll start with Isabel and then go with Morgan.
I don't understand how you were all saying that he should make another creature. Like, if it goes this badly the first time, why would you want to repeat your mistake? And clearly, like, Victor is not a good caretaker. Like, if you're arguing nature versus nurture, I really think in this case that there's some nurture involved because he like abandoned this creature just because he thought he was ugly. And so like, why should he be trusted to raise another person? It's like, asking a parent that like left their kid on the side of a highway to like, oh, we should trust them with another baby. Like, I don't know if that's logical, but I don't think he should make another creature.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Although I will say, then Victor is not raising the female monster, the monster is. And I think Fred seems much more responsible to me than Victor. But I still think your point stands that he is just doubling down on the mistake that caused all the problems in the book so far. So definitely can see your point there. Morgan?
I like the
Oh, you're just
Um,
commenting on the. That's okay.
I said yes. I think that he should make a companion for Fred because the consequence of him breaking his promise is gonna outweigh like what the monster could possibly do, like the new one, because we already know that Fred is not scared to like have backlash towards Victor. So I think, and also going off of what Aaron said earlier, like Fred, I feel like isn't inherently evil. He kind of turned that way when he felt like he wasn't loved. So I don't think this second monster will be born like as a terrible person like Fred is now. And I think she'll also help him.
Yeah, that's true. Although there are so many unknowns here, and that's part of the issue. Like maybe Fred was an anomaly. Maybe he just turned out to be really good and is just he got a good brain, and maybe the female monster will turn out much worse. But if he turns out to be the same, then I think your point stands. Okay, let's hear from Phoebe.
I did say that I think he should create like a female companion just because, you know, when you're alone in something, it's hard to find any joy. So like having someone else that's similar to you is like extremely helpful, and like having some solace and being able to like go to this creature and being like, hey, we feel the same. But the funny thing is actually there's a TV show called Penny Dreadful. And like the character Victor Frankenstein, like there's a character in it that's Victor Frankenstein. He makes a creature, the creature leaves and comes back and begs him for him to make a companion or he'll kill all the people he knows. And it actually turns out pretty bad because when he reanimates the female, he just reanimates a dead girl. And when she's reanimated, she remembers all her memories and doesn't want to be with Frankenstein, and it makes him more mad. So I don't know if it's going to be like that, but I know in one circumstance it doesn't end well.
Yeah, it's good. And it kind of reminds me of Ian Malcolm's point in Jurassic Park that you're creating life, and life is unpredictable. You're creating another autonomous being. Who says that she's going to want to stay with him? Who says she's not going to want to like run away? Maybe she'll enable his worst impulses. Maybe they'll go on like a murder spree together. So like, who knows what could happen when you're creating something new. So great points. Okay, so yeah.
So yeah, it went wrong the first time, but you can't really compare this time to the first time because the first time he was just doing it for the sake of science and he didn't really have a reason to do it, but he's doing it now to like protect the monster from like harming other people. Like he's doing it for a reason. He's not just doing it just to like see what happens for the second time. And like you can't say that it's gonna go wrong like it did the first time. Like there's just so many unknowns, and like it's since there's different motive behind it this time, like there's a big chance that it can go differently because he has like more control over what will happen.
Yeah, good. And I have to go on a digression here to say shout out to the people putting Frankenstein memes in the Padlet. The one that Frankenstein was the monster, Frankenstein wasn't the monster, Frankenstein was the monster. I actually have that, and I was going to show it to you at the end of the book, but now you see it. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a good one. Okay, so any other complications, thoughts, things we haven't mentioned? Yeah, Katarina.
I just think that if everything was like according to plan, especially this island, like hopefully then like be crazy, they'll be like far away from people. And I feel like it's hypocritical of him a little bit, or it's just
Yeah.
kind of like not fair. He's like not to get married,
Yeah, I could have a wife and a family, but no, you can't. I could give it to you if I wanted to, but I'm not going to. I agree. That does seem to me to strike me as very unfair. Yeah, something that hasn't come up that we spent a lot of time discussing in second period was the prospect of the monster and the monster's mate reproducing and having a bunch of different monster babies, and what would happen there. usually comes up. My response to that is, well, they're made from human DNA, so probably their children would be, not stitched together. They would look like normal human children. But also then there would be children who were raised by these two outcast monsters. And would that be a good thing for them? And what would come of it? Just something else to consider. Okay, so we're nearing the end of class, and I kind of want to hear, overall, now that these ideas have been put out, where do we stand? So I made this little survey that I'll put in the chat. So just indicate on there, yes or no. Should we make a mate for the monster or not? Where are you finding all these Frankenstein memes? Oh, well.
They're all so good. For some reason, we very I think it's like one big inside joke. Yeah. I still understand why they decided to make that decision. What's uploaded?
Yeah. All right, make sure you go vote yes or no. Monster have a mate. Okay, well, it looks like there's a pretty clear consensus, and most of you are thinking that, yes, he should go ahead and make a wife for the monster. So over the weekend, we'll see what happens. This is like one of the most climactic parts of the book. Victor has this decision. He's there. Is he going to go through with it? You'll find out in the next few chapters. So when we come back on Monday, we'll talk about what happens, whether Victor makes the right choice, or whether things are just going to get worse and worse. So final reminders, your notes are due today. Don't forget about the Lit Crit review essay. I'll give you some time to work on that next week, but that's due at the end of next week. So if you have some time this weekend, I would recommend finding your articles at the very least. So any questions before we go? Okay, thanks everyone. Enjoy a well-deserved weekend break. I'll see you on Monday.
Have a good one.
You too. Bye.